and welcome. I'm Noel Bonham. I'm the state director for AARP Maine, and I'm here at the Gracie Theater in Bangor, Maine, and welcome. And it's another gorgeous day in the state of Maine. Thank you for joining us today for this important event, Dark Secrets, the terrible truth about elder abuse in the family. In addition to all of you here in the beautiful Gracie Theater in Bangor, we welcome those of you who've joined us by Zoom from across the country. And there are a few hundred of participants today for this really important event. For those of you who may not know, AARP Maine, or AARP, was founded more than 60 years ago by a retired school teacher, Dr. Ethel Percy Andrus, who believed that everyone deserves to age with dignity and respect. She believed that every single member of society has worth, no matter their age, no matter their life story, no matter their changing needs as they get older. Today, AARP Maine is one of 53 state offices across the country, continuing to support programs, services, and age-friendly community models that enable older adults to age in place, to age with purpose, and to choose how they live as they age. And behind all of that work is a very strong advocacy wing that really advocates for older adults across the country. On behalf of approximately 200,000 members just right here in Maine, we strive to be a champion for older adults and their families, fighting for and equipping each individual to live their best life. Whether you are a caregiver on the cusp of retirement, looking for a fun way to meet people, or seeking meaningful ways to volunteer, we invite you to use all of the free resources AARP puts together and makes available for you and your loved ones. Now, if you're a volunteer, ever volunteered with AARP, either here in the state or anywhere else, I just want to take a minute to recognize you and thank you for all that you do as a volunteer for AARP, because we couldn't be AARP without you, and you make a big difference for AARP. So if you're a volunteer here, just raise your hand. Thank you very much. And I know there's several of our volunteers joining us by Zoom as well, so shout out to you guys out there. So our program today is co-sponsored with Legal Services for Maine Elders, who since 1974 have been protecting the rights of older Mainers. Their services have helped thousands of vulnerable individuals in their time of great need, and we applaud them for their tireless efforts. This year, Legal Services for Maine Elders celebrates their 50th anniversary, and we couldn't ask for a more apt collaborator for today's event. Thank you very much for all that you've done for the last 50 years. And the team is out there, quietly sitting there. So if you just raise your hands, please. And if you don't really know much about the Legal Services for Maine Elders, they actually changed their name recently. They used to be Legal Services for Elders. But if you don't know much about them, please look them up. And they have been offering an invaluable service in our state for the last 50 years. As many of you know, June 15th was World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, a perfect time to shine a spotlight on this critical issue. Elder abuse affects all genders, all cultures, races, and socioeconomic groups. It can happen just about anywhere in any setting. It could happen in a hospital, in a facility, at a shop, at a store, and even in a person's home. The Maine Elder Justice Roadmap, initiated in 2022 through the Office of the Governor, explains that 1 out of 10 adults aged 60 and older have experienced abuse in the past year. Just in the past year. That means tens of thousands of older Mainers experience elder abuse every single year. The Maine Elder Justice Roadmap also confirms that most elder abuse of all types is committed by a trusted person, someone known to the victim. Of those, most are family members. Such was the case with Brooke Astor, whose story of familial elder abuse made national headlines. Our keynote speaker today is Mrs. Astor's grandson, Philip Marshall, who will join us shortly, who will share with us his personal story and how the Brooke Astor story can help our own communities achieve elder justice. To facilitate Mr. Marshall's address, I would like to ask that you please take a moment to silence your phones. And I'll just stop for a moment so that you actually look at your phones in case they are turned on. So just take a moment and turn them off, please. We'd appreciate that. Thank you. Following Mr. Marshall's talk, there will be a brief intermission as we transition to a live on-site broadcast of the radio program Maine Calling through Maine Public. Due to the schedule of the broadcast, we ask that you please hold any questions you may have for Mr. Marshall until after the broadcast of Maine Calling. So we will have Q&A, but just wait till we're done with the radio recording, which is happening on the other side, and then we'll go back to Q&A. Now, it is my honor to introduce our keynote speaker. In 2006, after years of increasing concern, Mr. Philip Marshall sought a petition for guardianship for his grandmother, Brooke Astor, who was a victim of elder abuse by a family member. The story was chronicled nationally by the press, culminating in a 6-month criminal trial. In 2015, Mr. Marshall founded Beyond Brooke, through which he now tells his story and works to help the greater cause of elder justice. In addition to his work with elder justice, Philip Marshall is a noted academic, teaching and practicing in the field of historic preservation for over 30 years. He has held faculty positions at Columbia University, the University of Vermont, and Roger Williams University, where he serves as professor emeritus and immediate past director of the Historic Preservation Program. His consulting includes work with the Hopi Nation of Arizona, the Tibetan community in America, federal and state agencies, and many nonprofit organizations. Now, before I welcome him here, I know from experience that Philip is a hugger. And he just hugs everyone in the room. So if he had the time today and is able to, he would have hugged every single one of you. So I have a feeling that a hug is coming on. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Philip Marshall.
Noel, thank you so much. It's great to be here in this theater, which seems to be maintaining actors' equity standards. And I hope we all can maintain humanity's equity standards as we continue to maintain our lead role, center stage in our own life with supporting actors all along the way. Good morning, dear colleagues gathered on Hudson University's campus, gathered online, gathered in our shared cause. In 2018, I was heading to Northeast Harbor to give a talk. I chanced on Maine's No Excuse for Elder Abuse bumper sticker as I came out of Planet Fitness, just 5 minutes from here. In 2022, Karen of the Maine Office of Securities kindly sent me a sticker, which, as revealed, has been slowly wending its way back to Maine, here via New Mexico in March. We are together today to commemorate World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. This is our first World Day without Elizabeth Podnicks, its founder. In Elizabeth's honor, I submitted a tribute to the National Center for Elder Abuse, highlighting her life's work and legacy. The tribute included a call to action. It's not how fast or far we run. It's how we pass the baton. Dr. Elizabeth Podnicks has passed us the baton with flying colors, campaign color purple at the lead. Let's all keep pace. Thank you for inviting me back to Maine, AARP Maine, and Legal Services for Maine Elders, which is celebrating its 50th anniversary. Jake and everybody, happy anniversary. Thank you for inviting a victim, like many of you today, a person who has suffered from the social harm inflicted by elder abuse. Attention is the currency of our most personal relationships. To gain and maintain your attention, and to help you listen and look over taking notes and photographs, I have provided this talk as a PDF file already up at Beyond Brooke. Spoiler alert and trigger warning. Please consider what I'm offering you as a menu of food for thought with topics listed and linked to here. Many slides are appetizers, whetting your appetite for further exploration of resources and references linked to on the web. These may take longer to digest than crab cake, but they are just as nourishing. You can investigate any section and return to this menu by navigating on the upper right. My grandmother was Brooke Astor only in the last half of her century-long life. Her father was a career officer, eventually becoming commandant of the U.S. Marine Corps. From age 8 to 11, she lived in Beijing, where she met the last emperor. In 1953, in Maine, my grandmother married Vincent Astor, her third and last husband. Vincent died in 1959. In 1962, at age 60, she wrote a memoir of her peripatetic patchwork childhood. You would think she was steeped in nostalgia and ready to retire. Not so. In 1947, Vincent had established the Vincent Astor Foundation for the alleviation of human misery. After Vincent's death, my grandmother, as president from 1960 to 1997, furthered the foundation's mission by addressing the quality of life through engaged philanthropy decades before the practice was mainstream. The foundation provided grants to New York City's large cultural institutions, its crown jewels. My grandmother continued her interest in Asia, giving East meets West new meaning as she celebrated opening of the Astor Court at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. This was the first permanent cultural exchange between the US and the People's Republic of China. It was a geopolitical watershed moment achieved through cultural diplomacy. Her most treasured grant recipients were organizations and communities where the foundation provided seed money and the Astor seal of approval toward gaining greater endowment, many still sustained, including in Maine, where she came each summer for half a century to relax, reflect, and refuel. She had mountains and had tea with guests at her house in Cove End. She walked between flowers in bloom in the cutting garden, cultivated lovingly by the Hamer family. She made daytime visits to her Chinese-inspired camp, August Moon, and spent occasional overnights when the August moon was in full bloom. Well into her 90s, she was center stage as New York's first lady and a humanist aristocrat with a generous heart. In 1998, at age 96, she received the nation's top civilian honor, the Presidential Medal of Freedom, in honor of her achievements. In 2002, her close friend David Rockefeller hosted a 100th birthday party. Then she disappeared from the limelight. This is until July 2006, when the contents of my guardianship, which was to have been sealed, was discovered by the press, leading to front page headlines reading, "Disaster for Mrs. Astor." My grandmother would never want to be known as one of America's most famous cases of elder abuse, nor did she, while in the throes of Alzheimer's, choose to be victimized, to be deprived, manipulated, and robbed, all as part of a calculated scheme to defraud, as later characterized by the Manhattan district attorney. Yet the sad circumstances surrounding my grandmother have informed a timely and timeless cause in elder justice. This may be her greatest, most lasting legacy. At 104, she unknowingly entered her encore career as an advocate for older Americans. Just as her timing is critical to advance intentionally the quality of life, so now in her advanced age, she unintentionally advanced the quality of life at the end of life. The greatest impediment to elder justice is ageism. By example, my grandmother did so much to combat proactively this social impediment through the way she took on each day, year after year, decade after decade. It is ironic and so sad that my grandmother's ageless attitude did not protect her from abuse. The same can be said for millions of older adults suffering similar injury today. I was filled with angst, frustration, and a sense of impotence as I watched my grandmother's world that had spanned the globe and a century become so reduced and compromised. I was not sure what to do or who to turn to. I sought advice from several trusted people, including a sage high school friend whose family had been through similar circumstances. He advised, "Philip, follow your heart first, then follow the money." Our greatest concern was my grandmother's psychological abuse, one of the most difficult forms of elder abuse to give credence to, much less document and assess as evidence. So in large part, initially, I felt our fallback were the financials. But I now know financials are at the forefront of our campaign for elder justice. The financial industry, regulators, agencies, nonprofits, and law enforcement play a key leadership role in protecting older adults' net worth, self-worth, and lives. In my grandmother's case, during discovery, the financials revealed serial exploitation, outright and through coercion, by my father, Anthony Marshall, and other perpetrators. As chronicled by Meryl Gordon in her book, Mrs. Astor Regrets, for Brooke, Maine held out the promise of nature's beauty and rejuvenation for 5 decades. If she felt low, Covent lifted her spirits, and she treated the townspeople like extended family. Meryl continues, 6 months after Brooke signed the Maine estate over to Tony, he put the title in Charlene, his third wife's name. In her last years, my grandmother never returned to Maine. Her summers were never the same. Over the course of 5 years, through polyvictimization, revictimization, and escalation of serial exploitation, My father, in tandem with others, reduced my grandmother's net worth, self-worth, and life. In 2003, my father worked out calculations for a retroactive raise for managing his mother's finances. My grandmother retained a professional financial manager too. At one point, my father intended to pay back himself $8 to $9 million. He settled on $1 million. Why? Major General Russell was my grandmother's father. My father described his father as the compass of my life. He sent me on the right course. With the $1 million retroactive salary increase, my father bought a $900,000 yacht, which he named General Russell. He hired a captain to set their course to Northeast Harbor. This act of exploitation later earned my father conviction of first-degree grand larceny, one of 14 convictions against him that were upheld upon appeal. At the end of my father's 6-month-long criminal trial, in closing arguments, the Manhattan District Attorney said, Mr. Marshall used his mother as his own little piggy bank, as his own ATM. Today, I will address ageism, elder abuse, elder justice, rights, and guardianship. Elder justice is in its infancy compared to other realms that define our legal, ethical, and moral obligations. For humanity, elder justice can complete, not compete with, other causes, mindful of Hegel's words, paraphrased that the conflict is not between good and evil, but between goods that are each making too exclusive a claim. Elder justice has made too exclusive a claim in addressing ageism. Ageism isn't an affliction that launches late in life. It starts at the starting gate. Seniors are 81, 21, and 18. Ageism starts early. By focusing solely on how ageism impacts older adults, we overlook the chance to tackle ageism within the broader context. Too often, humanity's handling of our mortality, our terror management, pivots to ageism instead of more constructive ways to cope and hope and live. Ageism, when rooted in the prejudice against older adults, fosters disassociation and segregation. Here, ambivalent ageist persons may be primed to pivot away from older adults, away from their future selves. As a result, campaigns against ageism may unintentionally backfire when guided by a laser focus on ageism against older adults only. The greatest impediment to elder justice is ageism, but why did elder justice appropriate ageism? Over ageism being one of the many cumulative compounding inequalities throughout our life course. Experts and advocates for older adults appropriated ageism as they were desperate. Since the 70s, I've taught and practiced historic preservation. Historic preservation and elder justice may seem like two disparate fields, but they share profound commonalities. Both respect and protect the ageless value of that which is old, but may be discounted, sometimes until it's too late. Both share a common origin. They rose from the ashes of mid-century modernity. Union Station in Portland was a magnificent late 19th century structure that fell victim to mid-century modernity, which railroaded the station to its premature destruction in 1961. Mid-century modernity's campaign devalued anything old to include older places and older persons, for whom 1961 was a bad year too. In 1961, disengagement theory, sociology's first formal theory on aging, was established in the publication of Growing Old, The Process of Disengagement by Elaine Cumming and William Henry. The author's theory posits that aging is an inevitable mutual withdrawal or disengagement, resulting in decreased interaction between aging person and others in the social system he belongs to. Disengagement gave added momentum to other post-war trends. For example, employers who wanted to reboot their workforce gave seniors the boot. Talcott Parsons wrote the foreword. Earlier, in 1942, Talcott Parsons elevated age from the status of a conditional to an analytical variable. In so doing, Parsons argued that age is a fundamental concept for understanding social structure, and now as an analytical variable for scientifically helping shape how people are positioned and expected to behave within society. Some seniors stepped in line and played the part, guided by concepts considered in The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life by Irving Goffman, who received the American Sociological Association's McIver Award in 1961. In 1950, Erik Erikson's Childhood and Society explored psychosocial development across the lifespan. Erikson proposed 8 stages that individuals navigate, each with its own challenges and opportunities. Yet, as the title implies, its focus was on childhood and adolescence. It was not until 1997 that, at age 94, Joan Erickson, Erikson's sage collaborator and wife, introduced a 9th stage, which included strengths-based gerotranscendence. But this was too late for the second half of the 20th century and its older adults. Enhanced in this environment, modernity's mid-century campaign gained formal recognition and its distinct name, ageism. The term ageism was coined in 1969 publicly and in peer-reviewed publication by gerontologist Robert Butler, first in reference to a proposed project in the affluent community of Chevy Chase, Maryland. Butler was quoted by Carl Bernstein, who wrote a Washington Post article titled "Age and Race Fears Seen in Housing Opposition." Modernity's campaign against older citizens helped sow the seeds for elder abuse as an epidemic. For some citizens, ageism in the form of guardianship was the coup de grace, the final blow. Old age is not a diagnosis, observes Atul Gawande in Being Mortal. Yet many statutes still include the term advanced age in defining who needs a guardian, notes Erica Wood of the American Bar Association. It is no wonder that persons combating elder abuse singled out ageism as such a social impediment for older adults. The term elder abuse emerged in 1978, gaining traction after Congressman Claude Pepper used it during a congressional hearing as chair of the Aging Committee. Elder abuse, it's not always what we think. It's subliminal. Leading with elder, the word pair, elder abuse, may re-victimize older adults, as it potentially primes us to victim blame older adults first. And through guilt by association, it associates us with perpetrators. And as it casts older people as powerless and vulnerable, reinforcing stereotypes. The archaic elder abuser dyad is worse. It leaves out society, which is already disengaged over being enraged. Neither phrase adequately addresses the root cause of elder abuse as a social harm. The word pair reveals a simplistic dynamic that overlooks the root causes found in the social harm and many potential proactive societal solutions found in our circles of support. Enter Elder Justice. M.T. Connolly titled her talking notes Elder Justice Act of 2002 in advance of a meeting to discuss potential landmark legislation. M.T. explains in her 2023 book, The Measure of Our Age. First, we needed a name. I liked Elder Justice Act. It was short and named what we were for rather than against. Finally, a proactive name for our campaign, advanced by the act, enacted in 2010, and advanced by justice. But what does elder justice mean and aim to achieve? I explore this in two recent essays, a paradigm shift from reactive stop elder abuse campaigns to proactive preventive elder justice, and Elder Justice, a blueprint for an emerging coalition scaled society-wide. At the heart of justice, elder justice included are rights. As expressed by Lisa Nirenberg in her book, Elder Justice, Ageism, and Elder Abuse. To me, the recasting of elder abuse as elder justice seems incomplete. It casts freedom from abuse as a right, yet fails to explain how abuse fits into the broader scheme of justice and human rights. I wrote this book to explore that failure. Along our shared path, how can we best assess our progress in achieving elder justice? Upholding elder justice requires a foundation of rights and trust. Here, evaluating how society approaches guardianships become the critical test of how well we realize elder justice. Guardianship is the appointment by a state court of a person or entity to make personal and or property decisions for an individual whom the court finds cannot make decisions for themselves. When I first started advocating for elder justice, I supported guardianship as one means to safeguard older citizens. In 2012, I was co-recipient of the first Isabella Horton Grant Award, the Isabella, presented by the National College of Probate Judges. I was proud of that award. I had seen firsthand how guardianship helped save my grandmother. But as I gained greater understanding, my position on guardianship changed. In 2022, New York State senators held a hearing on guardianship. All 12 witnesses, save me, had tried to help their loved ones from a guardianship, abuse, and exploitation. After that hearing, my work has been transformed, fueled by the insight of fellow witnesses and other victims and experts nationwide. I'm driven by the determination of concerned persons who have been failed by society as they try in vain to protect loved ones, themselves, and society from perils of guardianship, whose alleged aim is to protect citizens. Expressed in Nicholas Luhmann's Trust and Power, guardianship manifests society's greatest responsibility held in trust, given the courts and guardians' broad scope fiduciary duties and the profound asymmetric power imbalance imposed on persons subject to guardian in the absence of beneficiary control. Erica Wood observed, guardianship can be a godsend or a gulag, a help or a hindrance. I refer you to Rachel Aviv's terrifying report on guardianship in the New Yorker. Mark Andrews explains the guardianship process gives insufficient attention to indispensable constitutional safeguards, such as the rights to equal protection of the law and due process. Today, we commemorate World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. So let's go global to explore rights. My grandmother received a lot of awards, but she would never want to be called a ward of the state. The same can be said for millions of other adults who have been or are subject to guardianship and referenced to in such demeaning ways. Under the Uniform Act of 2017, the terms ward and incapacitated person, which were rejected by the Third National Guardianship Summit as demeaning and even offensive, are eliminated. Luckily, we can refer to another Ward, namely Adrian Ward, president of the 2022 World Congress on Adult Capacity, which was held in Scotland. The World Congress no longer includes guardianship in its title. President Ward did not use the word guardianship in his entire farewell address. However, President Ward did note the failure of the United States to ratify the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability. The convention has been adopted by all UN members, with the exception of 8 nations. Nor has the United States ratified the convention's optional protocol. My first essay on guardianship chronicled the nationwide reporting on the subject by investigative journalists. The most extensive investigation to date was a catalyst for a congressional hearing in 1989. The hearing's briefing was titled, "Abuses in Guardianship of the Elderly and Infirm, a National Disgrace." Congressman Claude Pepper concluded in one short sentence, guardianship, is the most punitive civil penalty that can be levied against any American citizen, with the exception of the death penalty. Bill Ahern of the Associated Press testified on AP's 6-month investigation of the 2,200 guardianship cases. AP's findings were the catalyst for the congressional hearing. Here are 3 other examples. For the Providence Journal, Tracy Breton, who had won a Pulitzer Prize for investigative reporting, led a team of Brown University students who ran a series of articles on guardianship in 2018. Jack Brooke, one of the journals, reflected, "We saw how important journalism can be to hold people in public office accountable and to press for meaningful reform." Bloomberg Law published an investigation titled "In the Name of Protection" in 2023. In an interview with Katie Barlow, lead investigative reporter Ronnie Green noted, "On one hand, rights severely restricted and taken away. On the other hand, no oversight. That opens the door for major abuse and neglect." Last year, the Maine Monitor, in partnership with ProPublica, published a 6-month-long series on Maine's probate court, which includes guardianship. The principal investigative reporter was Samantha Hogan. Hogan has a distinguished career in investigative journalism, marked by her receipt of several prestigious awards. The Maine Monitor probate court investigation accumulated in 11 articles, cited and linked to, for you, here and here. Last week, June 11th, Hogan received the 2024 Livingston Award for Young Journalists for local reporting on Maine's probate courts and guardianship. In a series article about fraud in guardianship, Hogan notes, "The antiquated, underfunded, and understaffed probate courts have left Mainers vulnerable to being ripped off." A Monitor survey earlier this year of 10 of the state's 16 probate courts revealed that many do not audit conservators or guardians. In 1967, Maine voters amended the state constitution to set up a new probate court system with full-time judges. It repealed the county-based system established in the 1850s. The constitutional amendment never went into effect because it was contingent on legislators passing a plan to transition to a new court system. In 2021, the commission to create a plan to incorporate the probate courts into the judicial branch published its reports. The first recommendation was that the county probate court system should be fully incorporated into the state's judicial branch through the deliberately multi-step process detailed therein. But there's been lack of funding and opposition. In an interview with Samantha Hogan in 2023, State Senator Craig Hickman said, at some point, the legislature is going to have to find political will to do something that establishes a probate court system that hires full-time judges, because that's what the Constitution has told the legislature to do. Oh, sorry. Maine is provided with a mandate and a way in which needs can be met with opportunity. The opportunity to protect citizens' rights, the opportunity to harness existing state initiatives, resources, and acts so that guardianships will become unnecessary. What follows is framed in the context of functional federalism, my term. Functional federalism includes the federal government and our great United States, all stars of different stripes. Combating guardianship harm starts with states and their citizens, but some states, but all states actually, cannot do it alone, especially in response to guardianship and abuse and exploitation, acts that are deplorable, unconstitutional, criminal, systemic, and nationwide. Guardianship law is state law, yet some guardianship laws and their administration do not make certain states safe for older citizens to live or die in. Perpetrators know this to their advantage. To game this, some perpetrators even conduct interstate human trafficking. To help combat guardianship abuse, Congress passed the Uniform Guardianship, Conservatorship, and Other Protective Arrangements Act in 2017. When Senator Collins was chair, the U.S. Senate Special Committee on Aging recommended its nationwide adoption. Maine was the first state to adopt the act, slightly amended. Maine has met need with opportunity, and so, as goes Maine, so goes the nation, leading the way. And with a roadmap. The Elder Justice Roadmap, an initiative of the Maine Elder Justice Coordinating Council, which was established by executive order of Governor Mills. Here's one example of a waypoint along the path of elder justice cited in the roadmap. RISE is a conceptual model of integrated and restorative elder abuse intervention. The international team involved in RISE include Maine's Erin Salvo of the Office of Aging and Disability Services, and Patricia Kimball of the Elder Abuse Institute of Maine. The RISE model may help divert cases away from courts that handle guardianship. As referenced in an option may be to refer cases to RISE, either as an preferred, but as an alternative to or augment legal intervention. 50 years ago, one of Bernice Newgarten's seminal articles identifies the young old as potential social contributors, as well as the self-fulfilled. Yet still, for complacent citizens today, the term senior discount may be redundant, for they already feel that seniors are discounted, largely due to ageism. In this environment, it is understandable that ableism is a silent partner, as ageism may have already discounted older adults decades before any disability. Ageism can create a breeding ground for ableism, as older adults may be seen and feel themselves as inherently less capable well before any disability arises. By examining ageism and ableism throughout life, we can develop a more proactive approach to address and dismantle the cumulative burdens of intersectional inequality. Along the roadmap in hand, our guiding light and compass are our elder justice and disability rights communities. As expressed by Alan Sutherland, we have to recognize that disablement is not merely the physical state of a small minority of people. It is the normal condition of humanity throughout our life course. It's not only our United States who are all stars of different stripes. Citizens statewide and countrywide are all stars of different stripes, different customs, different ideas, and different abilities. With help, elder justice can reverse engineer our campaign against ageism in the broader context of our life course, ableism included. With help, elder justice can advance with insight provided by the decades of experience and success the disability rights movement has gained in advocating for rights. Then we can better place elder justice into the broader scheme of justice and human rights. Nationwide, elder justice and disability rights advocacy movements must work together more. All too often, they are isolated, as are citizens they seek to help. What I'm referring to here is private sector third-party advocacy, while recognizing the tremendous existing joint efforts in services and supports in Maine, in the Office of Aging and Disability Services and its partners, and in the Administration for Community Living and its partners. Toward buttressing our constitutional rights, Disability Rights Maine and Legal Services of Maine elders, in tandem with other advocates statewide, work hand in hand to help gain adoption of the Uniform Act in Maine. That was a major achievement to be gained. To further buttress our constitutional rights, the right to legal representation for persons subject to guardianship was clarified in 2022. Testimony was provided by ACLU Maine. Enter the nascent National Center for State and Tribal Elder Justice Coalitions, whose launch has been funded by the U.S. Department of Justice. The coalition recently awarded grants to 7 states and 1 tribal coalition. Maine received an award to enhance its extant programs. In the spirit of functional federalism, while recognizing our laboratories of democracy, our great United States, coalition members can share state and tribal achievements and lessons learned, including those in addressing guardianship. Today, I have focused on the need to uphold constitutional rights for persons subject to guardianship as a litmus test for elder justice. But at times, lack of oversight permits guardians to abuse and exploit persons in their charge by betraying or even hacking trust with no consequence. At times, guardianship provides means and even the motive for state-sponsored white-collar crime through omission, commission, and collusion. In April, I detailed this in my response to the Federal Register posted call for information by the Administration for Community Living, which acted on behalf of the Elder Justice Coordinating Council, which in turn includes 17 federal agencies, with the Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Justice at the forefront, as dictated by the Elder Justice Act. The FBI is not a member, but the Federal Bureau of Investigation is no stranger to guardianship. As chronicled in David Grann's book, Killers of the Flower Moon, the Osage Murders, and the Birth of the FBI, which investigated the state-sponsored guardianship abuse and exploitation that still affects the Osage Nation today. On my way back to Maine, I stopped by to witness the results of the 1920s and their fallout a century later. Most Osage buried in this part of Gray Horse Cemetery were murdered. These names will be familiar to those who read Grann's book or saw Martin Scorsese's film. The significant Elder Abuse Prevention and Prosecution Act has directed the U.S. Department of Justice to help train FBI agents in the investigation and prosecution of elder abuse crimes. EPA also directed the Attorney General to designate in each of the 93 federal jurisdictions not less than one U.S. attorney to serve as Elder Justice Coordinator for the district. We are honored to have Maine's Elder Justice Coordinator, Assistant U.S. Attorney Andrew McCormick, with us today and all along the way. EPA also addresses court-appointed guardianship oversight activities under the Elder Justice Act. I provided a statement which I sent to the U.S. Senate Special Committee on Aging for its March 30th, 2023 hearing titled Guardianship and Its Alternatives, Protection and Empowerment. I sent my statement to an Elder Justice Coordinator who is also a member of the White Collar Crimes Unit at the DOJ. He replied, "You are spot on about guardianship, elder abuse." As citizens of Maine concerned about rights and accountability and our future selves, while the UN Convention's optional protocol is not about to be signed by the United States anytime soon, you can all advocate on behalf of persons who are subject to elder abuse, guardianship abuse included. You can advocate in Augusta and connect with your legislators back home. With wisdom joined by compassion. I have a question. How do you sign wisdom? Okay. And how about compassion? Okay. With wisdom joined by compassion, I suggest that the joint standing committees on judiciary and on health and human services hold hearings on guardianship and invite as witnesses persons who have suffered harm. In his closing remarks at the 1987 congressional hearing on guardianship subtitled "A National Disgrace," Congressman Claude Pepper said, "I wonder if they'll get me. I'm 87. I have to be on the alert." The California legislature acknowledges June as Elder and Dependent Adult Abuse Awareness Month. I propose that Maine do the same next year. Yesterday, on Juneteenth, a congressionally recognized holiday, we commemorated Emancipation Proclamation and the 13th Amendment that abolished slavery and involuntary servitude except as punishment for crime. Yet some citizens remain in involuntary servitude, in permanent plenary guardianships without parole. Maine has adopted the Uniform Guardianship, Conservatorship, and Other Protective Arrangements Act. With probate courts moved, and with the act as a fulcrum, Maine has the opportunity to adhere to the letter and the spirit of the law, in upholding constitutional rights, and in practicing supported decision-making only over guardianship. These steps will protect our citizens, our freedom, and our future selves. In adhering to the Act, Maine will lead our United States to having the United States a step closer in adopting the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and in rendering guardianship obsolete. If you will hit the mark, you must aim a little above it. Every arrow that flies feels the attraction of Earth. Grounded by the gravity of elder abuse, let's aim high and hit the mark. Thank you so much. Thank you. Oh. Thank you.
Jay Martin from the Legal Services for Maine Elders has been wanting to bring Philip to Maine for a very long time to do just this, and I'm so glad we're able to do it with you. And thank you, Philip, so much for sharing your extraordinary story along with your insights and your call to action as well.
Thank
you. It has not fallen on deaf ears, so we have a lot of work ahead of us. But as Philip pointed out and listed with the number of people he has quoted here, there are many champions in Maine who are fighting to address elder abuse in our state, and it's really amazing. So, thank you. We're most on behalf of Maine Legal Services for Maine Elders and AARP Maine. We're most grateful for you for joining us today. And ladies and gentlemen, we will take a short break now to transition to the live broadcast of Maine Calling, which will be moderated by Maine's own award-winning journalist, Jennifer Rooks from Maine Public. For those of you who joined us on Zoom this morning, thank you for being part of our Elder Abuse Forum. If you would like to hear the Maine Calling broadcast, you can live stream it at mainecalling.org. And thank you so much for joining us today by Zoom. And the Zoom call is going to end right now. So thank you.